These were all over the place. Highest grade was a 100. I think there was a couple of those. Several were in the 90s, 80s. I think the class average was around a 76 or something like that. Low grade was a 3. Yeah, so, but I think that's kind of truth in advertising, right? Didn't I kind of mention before the exam that some of you are going to get it before the exam, some of you aren't, so you're going to have this. I don't know that anybody in the class actually got a 76. There might have been one. That would be like the anomaly. So we had several grades in the 80s and 90s, and then we had lots of grades that were like, 40s and 30s and 20s. Okay, yeah, 3. If you're in the 20s or teens or single digits, really evaluate what went wrong. Was this a lack of preparation? Was it test anxiety? Was the test just very, very different than you were expecting? Because you should be higher than that, right? Yeah. Now, if you're in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you probably got several points on several questions, but you just kind of across the board missed like half of every question or something like that. Some of you also should look at your, this isn't a great excuse since I gave you a warning over and over and over again about conversion questions, but if you did crappy on the conversion questions, like 20 points off your grade right off the bat, right? It's not really an excuse for that. Kind of a funny thing, I graded another class's exam, and the best student in our program, the exam was too long, so I only counted their best 7 questions out of 10. I didn't realize I made it that long, but whatever, so they did fine. But he missed, as a senior, missed a conversion question. And he's like the best student in our program. That's all he missed in the whole exam. It was just, I thought it was so I put LOL and made fun of him on the test. I don't know if he's ever missed a conversion question this whole, I can't even figure out what he was trying to do. I think I just threw him for a loop. It was a weird one. You had to convert from, did I give you a similar one? No, I gave you easier ones. Yeah, they had to convert base 4 to base 16. Just a little bit weird, Okay. But I don't know. Threw him for a curveball. But in any case, look at the exam. Remember, I have the policy. You can replace whatever you got in the midterm with whatever you get in the final. So whatever you got in this test can be completely replaced. But really try to self-reflect on what went wrong. Try to understand where the weakness was. Is there something you could have done, or are you just kind of waiting for stuff to click? Or were you not prepared? Did you just brain fart on some of the easy questions? Whatever it was, just self-evaluate. Wouldn't encourage necessarily anybody to drop, but answer those questions for yourself as to what went wrong in the exam if you're in that low, much, much lower points, the 20s, the 10, the teens and the single digits, because we shouldn't be there. Okay, so I'm going to go through the whole test and we'll come up with the answers, assuming I can solve these. There's no promises there. I've had a lot of Indian food in the last 2 days. You can't even pronounce half the dishes. Yeah, they all look the same.
Yeah, every time I'm trying to order at like an Indian place, I always end up.
Well, these were all like buffet thing. You just go up there and and then they have like 9 sauces at the end. You're not sure what you're supposed to put them on.
Yeah, it's like a roulette.
Yeah, so you just kind of dump them all over the plate and just see what flows where. You find out the last one was like the after dinner mint, and you were using it as a sauce. Because there was a thing like these cardamom seeds. Like they had like an after dinner mint thing. It was like this little packet.
Oh, really?
You like little cardamom seeds or something else. So it kind of had like a minty taste to it or something. But it was, not a mint. It was basically birdseed.
Okay. Interesting.
The guys at the table, they're talking to me in Hindi, saying, I'm like, do I mix it in water? What do I do with this? So it's funny enough. All right, number 1, what does it mean for Python to be loosely typed and interpreted? So loosely typed, okay, well, a couple different things. Loosely typed means that the language does not require us to specify what kind of value a variable is built to hold. So that's what the loosely typed piece means. All right. The interpreted piece means that logic is interpreted at runtime, or we could say converted to CPU instructions at runtime, which is relatively slow. So some hodgepodge of those two ideas. So interpreted loosely typed languages typically go together. They're relatively slow languages. They don't require, as some people said, they're kind of easier languages. That's a little bit of a weak statement. I don't necessarily think they're easier, but that's not wrong if you said some other decent stuff. But certainly, we talk about speed, talk about not having to define what kind of value a variable is built to hold, that kind of stuff. All right, questions on that one? Lots and lots of acceptable answers there, but then some unacceptable ones, like if you just wrote like the score of last week's tennis match or something. That would be extra credit. Who won in the final of last week in Indian Wells?
I don't know.
Anybody know who played in the final? I think you can Google it. Anybody know who played in the finals of last week's tennis match in Indian Wells? Roger Federer versus Juan Carlos Del Potro.
Naomi Osaka.
You've heard of Federer, right?
Yeah, he's the guy that won.
He's won most everything except French Opens, but he has won one of
That's
those.
the only guy I could.
Del Potro beat him 3 sets. It's interesting. Okay, number 2, convert. I got to write this down. What am I converting? I'm converting 1 0 0 1 1 1 0 1 from binary to decimal. All right, so this guy. Well, here. This is the ones place, the 2s, the 4s, the 8s, the 16s, the 32s, the 64s, the 128. So we have a 128 plus, this is a 64, a 32, a 16 and an 8 and a 4. A 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 1.
Yeah.
So all those guys, slap it into the calculator, and you get a 157. So that's a 1 times 1, which is a 1. That's a 0 times 2. That's a 1 times 4, which is a 4. That's a 1 times 8, which is an 8. That's a 1 times 16, which is a 16. That's a 0 times 32, which is a 0. That's a 0 times 64, which is a 0. That's a 1 times 128, which is a 128. Add them all up, you get your 157. Questions on that one? Did I get it right? Is that the right answer? Woot. Nailed it. All right, so next one. 1328 from decimal to hex. 1328 decimal to hex. So this is the other pattern, right? Where we're going to divide this guy by 16 over and over and over again. So we have 1328. We're going to divide this guy by 16. So we have 1328 divided by 16. That gives, we are doing decimal to hex, right? Yep. So that gives me an 83. Remainder 0. Then we do an 83 divided by 16. And that gives me a 5. 5 times 16 is an 80. So remainder 3. Then 5 divided by 16 is 0. 0 times 16 is 0 with a remainder of 5. Then we read our answer from bottom up, so it should be 530 in hex. Make sense? Questions on that one? Did I get that one right?
Yes.
That would be really funny if I would have missed one of the conversion questions. Sitting up here just harping on it. You just can't miss it. Just don't be an idiot. Yeah.
You just can't.
That's why you should show your work, because none of us are above making a stupid little math mistake, right? But I can't do much when you just right next to it the answer of 123 or something. Like, where did you get that from? So I can't go and find bonus points. Always show your work, especially if you're one of the folks that missed one of these questions. Show me your work so I can see where you went south, because if you went south on something very simple, then I can give you most of the points because you had the right pattern, you had the right math, you just went from 8 to 32 and missed the 16 or something. Just did something complete. That you wouldn't do again. You just were under test pressure or something. Forget how to count, which has happened before. Let's see. Write the necessary code to display all of the odd numbers between 1 and 100,000. And we're Python in here, right?
Yes, we are.
Okie dokie. So I'm actually going to write this on this bulleted thing because that'll help me indent better, I think, on here. All right, so what am I doing? All the necessary code to display. So display, print to the screen, all the numbers, all the odd numbers between 1 and 100,000. So we're going to say for I in, don't capitalize. Deal. If all you missed was putting 100,000 instead of 100,001, that's fine. I didn't take off. But 1 to 100,000 inclusive you'd have to go all the way to 100,001 because it does not include this last number. And we're printing out only odds, right? Okay. So actually, maybe the better way of writing this one would have been a while loop actually then. So we'll say I is equal to 1. Then we'll say while I is less than or equal to 100,000. We will go ahead and print the current value of I, and then we'll say I is equal to I plus 2. So it'll start off at 1, then it'll go to 3, then it'll go to 5, then it'll go to 7, blah, 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 blah. Make sense? You're surprised it works?
No, I was saying mine was more complicated.
I would expect so. Yours was fine, though, if I remember correctly.
It works.
Every now and then, a student will have a better, a more efficient solution than I have. But usually, I don't want to have to write too much because then I get confused. So it sucks getting old, I'm telling you. Just spend half my day wondering where I am.
I think there's something for that.
I'm already too much stuff. I'm driving cars with paralysis drugs. All right, what's next? 5. What does the following function do? Give an example of sample input and output. Let's see, what does this guy do? All right, do something. Takes a list as a parameter. If the length of the list is greater than 0, then we're going to store. So as long as the list has crap in it, we'll store one of the values inside of the first value inside of blah. We'll go through all the rest of the values. All right, so this guy returns the largest value in the list. I start off by storing in blah the first value. Then I go through and check every additional value in the list, finding out if any of them are bigger than the current value for blah. If they are, I set blah equal to that value. So I'm checking every single value in the list, and I'm ultimately returning whichever one was the largest. Make sense? That's what that code does. Returns the largest value of largest value in the list. All right, questions on that one? Go ahead. The assumption might be made to that you're comparing that it's filled with integers, but if it was letters, it would be looking at the Unicode value of them. So it would work for letters as well, but the assumption would be that it's filled up with numbers. So because we're comparing some number to another number, is this number greater than this other number? But at the same time, we can say, is A greater than C? It's not. Because A and C underneath the hood have Unicode values that they map to. They have this character lookup thing. Now, one thing I might point out here. So So understand like the confusion with the question, right? This is why saying that a loosely typed language isn't necessarily easier. If this was a strongly typed language, I would have just shown you, you would have known exactly, here, I'll go take it. You would have known exactly what was in that list, right? But otherwise, you had to kind of, based on the rest of the code, decide what was likely stored inside that list based on what the rest of the logic was doing. That's kind of a problem with loosely typed languages. You don't necessarily know. I mean, I happen to name it LST, indicating that it's probably a list, but nothing kept me from naming that variable elephant, right? So again, I'm kind of comparing them in a mathy way. Is one value greater than another value? So you would probably assume it's numbers, but if you assume it's letters, it would also still work. But anyways, that's the any way you cut it, it's returning the largest value in that list. All right, next one. Write the necessary code to fill a list up with the even numbers between 1 and 100,000. Okay, so this is similar to number 4, except instead of displaying stuff to the screen, we're putting stuff into a list. And we're doing evens this time, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Did I skip one? No, I just said that. 5 returns the largest value in the list. All right, 6. I'm going to just steal this code so I don't have... Well, actually, can I just put it on this slide? Yeah, we'll just do it on this slide. So we're going to say, I'll say answer is equal to the empty list. And we'll start this guy off at 0. Instead of printing, we'll say answer dot. Now you didn't have to use append if you didn't want to, but append will work. You can say answer at dot append the current value of I, then I equals I plus 2. Another thing you could have said is answer square bracket. You would have needed another counter here, I, in order to put it in there. So this is the best way to do it. So again, we're looping through all of, in this case, the even numbers. So I'm starting at 0, then it goes to 2, then it goes to 4, then it goes to 6, so on and so forth. Each time through, instead of printing it, I am adding it to my list. I created an empty list up here. Now I'm filling that list with stuff in here. Make sense? All right, so that one's very similar to number 4, with the difference being that we're looking at even numbers instead of odd numbers. Some of you, let me just show an alternative version of this. Here, I'll put it on another slide. If you wanted to write this with the for loop version, we would say something like answer is equal to the empty list. Then we'd say for I in range of 0 to 100,001. Then we would ask the question if I mod 2 was equal to 0. So if I is an even number, if I mod 2 is equal to 0, then we want to keep it. So we'll say answer dot append the current value of I, like that. So this is us asking if I is even. Similarly, in number 4, if we wanted to ask if I was odd, we can say is it equal to 1? Or not equal to 0, if that made you happier. All right, so that's how you would officially check for even and odd, but we happen to know that if you have an odd number and you add 2 to it, you have another odd number. If you add 2 to that, you have another odd number. If you add 2 to that, you have another odd number. Let's see how long I can just keep saying that until we get annoyed. If you have an even number, you add 2 to that, you have another even number, so on and so forth. All right, so you didn't actually have to ask the question, but you could have. This is fine. All right, any question on telling difference between evens and odds? And for those of you who missed this one, don't fret. Students always feel like idiots after they couldn't figure out whether a number was even or odd. I don't want to talk about it. It's like that was it? Kind of goes back to the first day of class when I said human beings have become so good at solving problems that we forget how we've solved them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in here can identify an even number or an odd number.
Yeah.
But when was the last time you thought about what that actually means? You just look at it and say that's even or odd.
Yeah. How do we? we just
You
have
learned about it when
memorized?
you were 3. Okay, something like that. All right, what was that? Am I on another one? What number am I on? 7? Write a function this time. It takes a string as a parameter, returns that string in reverse. So we are reversing a string. Now, a couple of you, I'm going to say, cheated using the built-in function, but since I didn't explicitly say you couldn't use it, I didn't take off points. But I'm going to write it without using the built-in thing. All right, so did I tell you what the name of the function was? Or just said write a function. All right, define a function. So we're going to def, that defines a function. We'll call this guy reverse string. This guy's going to take a string as a parameter, so I'll go ahead and name that guy S. We're going to be building a brand new string, so I'll start off answer is equal to the empty string, like this. All right, now I need to walk my string from beginning to end, filling in answer, or I can walk my string from, I can walk my string from end to beginning, filling in answer one direction, or I can walk my string from beginning to end and fill up answer in the other direction. I'll show you both versions of this, okay? The one that I think is most straightforward is to walk S from the end towards the beginning. So I'll say for I in range of length of S minus 1, which is the last legal bucket in S, all the way down to and including 0. So that's to -1, and then take steps of size -1. So that'll go from like a 5 to a 4 to a 3 to a 2 to a 1 to a 0, including the 0. Each time through, I'm going to say answer. Oh, I'm off on my keyboard here. There we go. Answer is equal to answer. Trust me, I would do way better writing than typing this. I just got fat fingers on the keyboard. Answer is equal to answer plus S set position I. And then in the end, that. Return answer. So the for loop goes from the end of S to the beginning of S, concatenating each character onto the end of answer, building up S in reverse inside of answer, and then I'm returning answer, which is the reverse of S. That make sense? Now, an alternative to this, here's an equivalent answer. I'll just create a second slide here. I'll actually start off at bucket 0, go all the way up to, but not including the length of S, taking normal size steps of 1. And each time through, I'll say answer is equal to the current value of S concatenated with answer. So I'll just build answer in reverse. I think that makes it's equivalent. This will be the same output. Mm-hmm. I personally think this makes less sense. I think if you're building something in reverse, you should walk it in reverse. At the very least, when you're a beginning programmer, that's good practice. Getting used to having for loops that go from the end of something towards the beginning or from the beginning towards the end. But you can just build it backwards if you go through it forwards here as well. Okay. All right, so this slide and this slide give the identical outputs. I did return on here, right? Yeah, they give the identical outputs. All right, question about that one. All right, what number was that?
That was 7.
7. Man, my eyes are just sucking today. It's probably all the 100 mile an hour VR yesterday. That's such a great way for the trip to go by.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only inconvenience at all was just the screen kept moving when the road curved. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, that trip just went by like nothing.
It'd be nice
It's like a free Uber ride.
Yeah, basically.
And I just told them they were going to crash my car. Just make sure you total it. Well, I mean, your car value goes way down if it crashes, then you have to fix it.
But at least you have a car.
Well, I'll just get a new car. I have good insurance. You don't want to fix. I mean, I have a nice car. You don't want to fix your car and then have a car that's worth 80% what it should be worth because it was in a stupid accident. One time I was hit on the guy hit me on the interstate. It was actually in this car, so actually the problem's already a problem. I was going down to a breakfast place with some students actually, and it was like in the morning on a Saturday morning. We were in the right lane going 55, not speeding because I didn't have one of the students driving apparently. This guy, he says he just lost control in the rain. I think he fell asleep at the wheel, but he slams at 65 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour into the driver's side where I was sitting of the car. And I was fine. I drive a big SUV, so I mean, the door didn't open anymore, but I had to do the Dukes of Hazzard thing, and then I realized I didn't fit through that. If I don't fit into an MRI, I'm not going to fit in. So I crawled out the other side. We still went to breakfast, but this dude didn't have insurance, didn't have a license.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he had nothing. Yeah, so I don't even know what happened to him.
You should get arrested.
Cool. Well, the cops told us they got all our information and told us to have a nice day, and they were still talking to him. I mean, my car was perfectly drivable, just the driver's side door was, all smashed in and stuff, but we were fine. But I think my car lost like 10% of its presumed value just because of some accident that wasn't even my fault. I had no part in that accident. I did everything right, yet my car's worth less.
I've been into
That's how they get you.
3 accidents, and none of it was my dad's fault.
That was my only accident. I don't drive fast. I just listen to my audiobooks.
But one guy was texting one time. He slammed into the back. Spectacular.
Distracted.
Huh?
He was anti-audio.
Oh, you're anti-audiobooks?
No, no, the guy was.
Oh, he seemed like a very nice guy. He seemed really, because he should have probably just pulled off and left. I'm surprised he didn't, but we sat in the car. I called the police and stuff, but kind of expected him to just, if I didn't have insurance or a license.
I don't know.
I have no idea. Well, he didn't. What are they going to take away? He didn't have a license. All right. So let's see. Number 8. What does the following function do? Thank you. Yeah, no, you can plug. You should find out what 8, 9, and 10 are. What does the following function do? Give an example. Okay, let's see. Do something. Takes a variable s, probably a string, int a. All right, so this guy will add up the integer version of all the characters in S. So it'll give you the Unicode value of this. Alternatively, if you assume that S is filled up with numbers, it'll sum up all the numbers that are inside of S. So this sums everything that's in that collection. So we assume that S is a collection similar to a list. It could be a string. It sums up all those values, stores it in A, and returns A. All right, that's number 8. Number 9, write a function that takes 2 integers and returns the larger of the 2 integers. That one should have been pretty easy. So def, we'll call it find max. We'll take in an A and a B. We'll say max is equal to A if B is greater than A. Max is equal to B. Return max. So we'll assume that A must be the larger number. Then we'll see if we were wrong. So we'll say if B is actually greater than A, we'll change our presumption, set max equal to B. Then we'll return max. Alternatively, you could have said if A is greater than B, return A, else return B. Okay. Keep in mind, though, that you can't say if A is greater than B, return A, else if B is greater than A, return B, because then it won't return if they're the same. Right? You can't say if one's bigger than the other or one's smaller than the other, because then you're missing what if they're equal to each other.
I was actually giving them a good answer,
Yeah.
What you just said.
Yeah. Well, if you do have questions about your exam, feel free to come up and ask. If I owe you some points, I'll give you some more points. If I took off, if I didn't take off enough points, I'll take more off. I won't take off more points. But if you do think I graded something unfairly, do come up and I'll explain why I did that. Okay, so that's number 9. Number 10, what does the following function do? Do something takes in 2 strings. If the first string is longer than the second string, so if the length of S1 is longer than the length of S2, we're going to return S1 concatenated onto S2. Otherwise, we'll return S2 concatenated with S1. So for instance, if you have 2 words, the longer word will come first. Elephant and cat will return the string elephant cat. Make sense? So longer string will come first. All right, questions, comments, concerns. I feel like today should be one of those days for the bribed tip jar. Right here.
Do you want to see?
All right, so we'll be back on Wednesday. We'll continue on with other stuff. Remember, this is Holy Week, so later on this week, school is after classes that start from after 4 p.m. on Thursday are canceled. No classes Friday, and then also no classes Monday. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Can somebody confirm that?
It's not Monday.
No Monday classes, right? On Monday.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will see you on Wednesday.